I've heard of fecal transplants as like a way of basically inserting a healthy bacteria into your system.
Talking about poo does make most people feel a bit awkward because that's what we're talking about. Feces poo is a carrier for a lot of bacteria that comes out of your gut. Some rather innovative scientists have looked at that and asked the question, is transplanting someone's feces going to be able to transfer some of the good bacteria that the donor has?
Welcome back to Pivio. Today we have Daniel Derrick. He's actually the managing director of Pivio. Thank you for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Brendan.
So my first question is, why Pivio? Why did you start Pivio? Kind of a little bit of background here.
Sure. When we look around the world, it's clear to us that there is a new pandemic, and that is a pandemic of obesity, a pandemic of chronic disease. And what is clear to us is that this is actually reversible and it's preventable. And so we scoured the world for what programs exist that have a lot of evidence about changing that trajectory towards these avoidable chronic diseases. And we came across a program that a genius and a gentleman, Hans Diel, created called CHIP, the CHIP program, which back then was the cardiovascular health improvement program. And that really addressed those core behaviors that lead to chronic disease, such as cardiovascular disease. So in discussions with Hans, we recognized that this could really affect thousands, ideally millions of people, because the number one killer in US is because of chronic disease. And if this program can play a small part in reversing some of those trajectories, then we would have left a pretty big impact on society and the world. And so about 13 years ago, we acquired this program. And over that time, we have looked to improve the program so it's even easier for anybody to adopt these behaviors and program. The rebrand to Pivio is because fundamentally this is a choiceful pivot anybody can take in their life. And it's so heartwarming when you hear the stories from the people that have graduated from Pivot, because they talk about this renewed hope they have in life. When they talk about looking forward to playing with their grandchildren into their old age. When they talk about how they have more mobility, more zest for life, it makes it all really worthwhile.
Absolutely. So the name Pivot, there's the show Pivot Point. Tell me a little bit about that real quickly.
Yeah. You know, when we looked at the original program, it did a fantastic job of imparting key information and helping educate any viewer about the why behavior change is important. With Pivot Point, we took that a step further because we brought in a whole range of subject matter experts. These are world leaders, leading experts in their field. And we wanted to help real people on their real life journey make this change. And so it was fun to watch the camaraderie of the actual participants as they navigate the change that is required with support of subject matter experts. And what was really pleasing is that each of these participants made huge strides in their own health trajectory. And therefore, they've now got an improved zest for life, a better quality of life. It's not about living long, it's about living well. And seeing these guys just support each other through the ups and the downs and the challenges was really inspiring. And so this Pivot Point series that we cut has allowed many others to just watch this journey and be inspired, but also recognize that at times it's hard work.
Mm-hmm.
And yet people being able to persevere through these hard challenges has just enabled the viewers who are about to start the same journey to just recognize what it takes to be successful.
To give a little bit more context to the show, it was fascinating. I was actually there when it was being filmed, but this was Pivio is a 12-week program and we had 6 participants going through the 12-week program, sort of like for lack of a better term, Biggest Loser style reality show, going through the 12-week program in a mansion on the beach in Florida. And it was fascinating to see them go through the program and just almost instantly see these reversals in their chronic diseases, which is amazing to see. So just thought I'd add to what you said about that. What would you say is like the goal? I mean, you kind of already touched on this, but the goal, maybe the broader goal of Pivio in terms of who you want to reach, you know, that type of thing.
Yeah, it's a great question, Brendan. You know, it really comes down to reaching those people who have understood that the train tracks they are on is not the train tracks they want to be on. And that could be for a variety of reasons. It could be because they are now starting to receive some pretty confronting counsel from their physicians and doctors that help them realize that unless change is made, then it's going to get harder from here. And that, I would imagine, applies to many, many people. It's not just those people who have a diagnosed chronic disease like diabetes, like hypertension. It can be just those who really recognize that they want to live better. And so when we look across the market, we see a spectrum of ages, of genders, of nationalities, and we see the common thread is those people that recognize that they can and should live better. And so when we look to recruit participants into Pivio, we actually see a spectrum of motivations. Some people that really understand their reason why they want to improve their life. Other people haven't quite articulated that yet in their own mind. And so we are targeting those that really do want to actually live a more full, more abundant life. That is a more joyful life, a life with more hope, that they're less encumbered by their current health situation. Where Pivio works best is those who are willing to put in the effort to make some change. And we see some amazing stories of people coming off medication, even reducing their medication levels, because they recognize when they address the root cause of the health condition, they don't need as many doctor visits. They are more active. They have a more joyful existence. And when we watch these people and join them on that journey, you see their enthusiasm for the future actually grow. And so, yeah, we welcome in a spectrum of people across any age, gender, ethnicity, geography, because Pivio addresses this root cause. And you may wonder, what is this root cause? Chronic inflammation, where the body is fighting itself. It's almost like there is a fire lit within your body that it starts damaging your internal organs. And this chronic inflammation is what is at the root cause of many chronic diseases. Inflammation leads to disease. And what Pivio does, it really quells the fire. It allows that burning chronic inflammation to subside, and therefore you come off those train tracks towards chronic disease. So anybody that feels they're headed towards chronic disease, we welcome with open arms in Pivio, because we know we can address what's causing them to be on those train tracks.
Talk to me a little bit about good bacteria in your gut, in your stomach.
Sure. Yeah. When you say the word bacteria, most people think that is gross. They think it's just disgusting, and no one really wants to talk about bacteria, right? Yet, what we've come to learn is that there is good bacteria and there's bad bacteria. And let's just use the term bugs. And the science in this space is rapidly evolving, and there are some really special, smart-minded people here who are correlating what we eat impacts the nature of our bugs in our gut. And there are good bugs, there are bad bugs. And we have bacteria all over our body, on our skin, in our mouth, and in our gut. And what is amazing to me, Brendan, is that we think we are human, and we are. Yet, when you think about all of the DNA, all of the genome that makes up who we are as a human, what amazed me is that we are only 1% human. Let me explain. The DNA I get from my mum and dad is only 1% of the total DNA in my body, on my body. 99% of all the bugs in me or on me is based on our microbiome. And that microbiome we can influence by the choices of where we live, by how much outdoor time we have, and what foods we eat. The stress levels can impact your biome. And there's been a lot of studies to understand, well, how do I actually change the balance of good bugs to bad bugs? What the studies show is that if you have a greater proportion of bad bugs, you're more likely to get a chronic disease. If you can change that ratio to have more good bugs, you're more likely to live well. And the studies that are emerging are quite surprising in what they're concluding. Because there was a study, if I can just refer down to the paper that was published in 2014, Professor Rob Knight and Jeff Leach, as part of the American Gut Project, they concluded in 2014, so quite a few years ago, that the amount of plants you eat has the biggest impact over your gut biome, which means that if you eat a wider variety of plants, you're going to have a healthier gut, therefore less likely to have chronic disease. And this was quite revolutionary, Brendan, because never before had anybody linked your health outcomes to the bugs that are in your gut. And that 2014 study was fascinating, yet in 2018, Daniel McDonald and colleagues published a research paper using 10,000 citizen scientists. And if I can just read a quote from that, I found it fascinating. It said, "We therefore characterized the impact of dietary plant diversity," that's the spectrum of plants that you consume, "as measured using various clever tools. Individuals who consume more than 30 types of plants per week, compared to those who only consume 10, had significantly reduced abundance of antibiotic-resistant genes." It gets technical, but what it's saying is that your body's ability to fight inflammation is improved the more plants you eat. And the fascinating thing about that study, Brendan, is they only tested an upper limit of 30 plants. The theory is if they tested 50, you'll get an even better result. And so the key learning for us was, if you want to improve your health, you want to improve your gut biome, then consume more plants, more variety of plants. And in today's society, we often eat the same types of foods day in, day out, and whatever foods are available. And when I've spoken to Rob Knight, who is another gentleman and a genius, he talks about this concept of eating the rainbow. And at first, I was scratching my head thinking, what is he talking about? Because I walk into a convenience store in Midwest US, and I'm hit by an assault of colors, brightly colored confectionery packaging. They've got all the the sugar, the carbonated beverages that yell at me to buy them.
Right.
Or I go to the counter and there's a whole range of Mars bars and the like to eat. So I'm assaulted by a spectrum of colors. And that's not what he's talking about. Because when you think about nature and you think about the colors inherent in fruit and vegetables, you can have a purple beetroot, you can have a bright orange carrot, you can have a mango that's yellow, the green beans, etc. There is a massive array of colors that nature generally provides us. And if I chose to eat a greater variety of those colored fruits and vegetables, I'm going to be healthier.
Right.
So this concept of eat the rainbow is a really simple way to calibrate what am I eating today? Am I eating all beige foods, all foods that are brown and yellow and deep fried and processed? Or am I choosing foods that, because they're so bright and colorful, are interesting and they're actually better for me? So this science continues to evolve, and there is clear linkages, Brendan, which surprised me, to the bugs in your gut impact whether you become obese and fat. So that's a whole nother field we can talk about another time.
I think the study said 30 plants per week, 30 different plants per week. That just seems like almost overwhelming to me in a way, because I'm thinking I probably have 3 or 4 a week, sadly, you know, whatever, and it might be lettuce, which is probably the lowest nutritional value, and then maybe like broccoli, peas, and something else. How do you go about, well, it's sort of 2 questions. One is, how would I implement 30? And you kind of answered this already, but when you say plants, does that also include like the fruit of a plant when they're saying plant? So those would be my 2 questions.
It's a really great question. And let me perhaps first unpack why plants are important. And plants mean fruit, it means vegetables. Also, frankly, it means nuts, seeds, grains.
Okay.
And let's go back to a little bit of physiology around the microbiome. The good bugs need fuel. They need fuel to thrive. They need fuel to grow and increase their abundance and have more types of bugs in your gut. And what fuels the good bugs is fiber. Now, fiber is often associated with things that taste like cardboard. It's associated with things like must eat, and it's associated with what I need to move food from here out through the bottom. Yet fiber actually plays a really important part in the health of our gut bugs, because it's fiber that fuels the good bacteria. And therefore, if I don't have enough fiber, I'm actually starving these good bugs of the fuel they need to thrive. So most of society just thinks you get fiber from bread, you get it from cereals and the like, and that's true. But what surprises many people is that there's a lot of fiber in fruits and vegetables. Raspberries, as an example, has a very high level of fiber. And so when you start eating plants, and colorful plants at that, you start consuming a variety of sources of fiber and polyphenols. That's the goodness within the fruits and vegetables. And it's this fiber that fuels the growth of the good bugs. Yet, as you say, Brennan, we're all creatures of habit. We probably, if we have fruit, we might have an apple, maybe a banana every now and then. And it takes a fairly curious, adventurous mind to walk down the aisles of the fruit and vegetable section and pick up other fruits that they haven't tried before, pick up nuts and seeds and think, how can I incorporate that in my diet? What dishes do I do today that I could actually put in, perhaps some seeds on top? What occasions during the day could I, with curiosity, try a new fruit and understand how perhaps I can include that in my day's journey? You know, what's confronting when we look at the statistics from the Center for Disease Control, CDC, they've found that 2/3 of Americans ate fruit every day. That's a good thing. But that means 1/3 don't eat fruit every day. Yet the fruit consumption is actually declining. 10 years ago, we found that about 77% of Americans ate fruit every day. Now it's down to 65%, and that trajectory is dropping off. So not only are we not eating fruit, we're eating a very small spectrum of fruit. And so on the PVO program, we encourage people down the grocery aisles and encourage them how to shop, how to actually approach the quite intimidating fruit and vegetable section and determine how best I can use that in my daily journey. When I look further in the data, only 12% of adults eat the recommended quantity of fruit, let alone the variety. And so this is what PVO helps people do. It helps them recognize the importance of why, but then how. And that how is often where people fall over, because it can be quite scary. Changing habits, changing behaviors. And we want to support people through that chain.
So sort of related to talking about the good bacteria, good bugs. So I was just recently sick. After battling it for a while, my doctor prescribed an antibiotic, which I'm hearing more and more of is bad for you. Talk to me a little bit about what that has done to maybe it's killed the bad bugs, but also hurt my good bugs. What might have happened there, and how do I fix myself from that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And there is a role for antibiotics in society. What we see is that often antibiotics are prescribed willingly before they're necessarily to be used. So Professor Rob Knight, who has 3 professorial titles, he's an amazing character, has done a lot of work in this space and has measured the effect of when people consume antibiotics, what happens to the overall ecosystem of your gut. Now, I say ecosystem intentionally. Imagine like an Amazonian forest. There's a whole variety of trees and plants and wildlife. That's kind of like what's happening in your gut. Antibiotics comes along like a carpet bomb and destroys it all. Destroys all the good bacteria, all the bad bacteria, like it will destroy all of the bushes and trees in a forest. In that act, there are some weeds that are destroyed. That's a good thing. But also some of the good plants are destroyed. And if you can imagine an Amazonian forest that's being destroyed from above, then you can picture how long it takes to restore that ecosystem. And as that ecosystem restores, the weeds will grow, as will the good plants. What we want to do is ensure that the good plants have the best chance of growing faster than the weeds. And what allows that, what encourages that, is what we spoke about before, where the wider the variety of plants you consume because they have fiber, the better chance you've got of restoring a healthy gut ecosystem. So the recommendation that we would provide is eat the rainbow. Eat a spectrum of colorful, varied plants, because they carry all the nutrients required to restore your gut ecosystem, and it will take some time.
Do you have any idea of how long it takes to recover to be like what is considered a healthy gut?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because we are still determining what is the shape of a healthy gut. What I mean by shape, there are a number of species of bacteria that contribute to health or also contribute to disease. And it's that balance that makes sense. It's what they call dysbiosis, the balance between the good and the bad. And what we see is that when somebody has that balance right, they're more likely to be healthy. There's also the functionality of bacteria. What does the bacteria actually do in your gut? And science is emerging that shows that more than just understanding what the species profile is what do the species do? And that's probably the more important question. How can we create a gut ecosystem where the bugs that cause the good outcomes are the ones that really thrive? At the core of this, it really comes back down to the choices we make in our life. What foods we eat, the environment we live in, do we exercise outdoors? These choices we make are the best choices that can lead to a healthy gut, therefore healthy life.
So this is sort of a tangent, but I just thought of it just because I was just having a conversation with a friend. But so when we talk about eating the rainbow, and paleo is a plant-based, whole food plant-based diet, it encourages that. The question, though, that came up was, how can you possibly get enough protein on a whole food plant-based diet? What do you say to that question?
Yeah, it's a common question we are asked because a lot of people associate protein with eating beef or chicken, fish, and that's true. That's where a lot of people consume their or receive their protein intake. In the plant world, there's also a variety of plants that contribute to your protein intake. Legumes, beans, nuts, and grains to a lesser degree. Yet fruits and vegetables can also contribute to your protein. So we see that across someone's repertoire, there is more than enough protein that is consumed. The data shows that there is no protein deficit in our diet today. In fact, the opposite is true. We almost consume too much protein. And yet many people believe that protein is the most important nutrient. Well, it is important, but we've got to make sure that people consume the variety of nutrients, including but beyond protein. We've spoken at length around fiber, and we believe fiber plays a really critical role in someone's health, but so does all the other micronutrients that are important. And so when we recommend a whole food plant-based diet, it's the spectrum, it's the variety that is important. And what you'll find, Brendan, is that you can almost never eat too much of the good food. And that's again because when you consume the foods that have a quality level of protein or fiber, they also fill you up. They're satiating. And when you fill up on the good food, there's less temptation to deviate to some of the bad food, which we all do at times.
Right.
And so when we talk about protein and fiber, they have the role of improving our gut biome, they have the role of improving our overall health, but it's also they fill us up. And when they fill us up on the good things, then we're going to have a better quality diet as a result.
One topic that I found very interesting was this idea of almost transplanting a healthy gut biome, right? And so I've heard of fecal transplants as like a way of basically inserting a healthy bacteria into your system. Tell me about that. It seems like such a crazy concept, but also interesting.
I tell you, your listeners must be recoiling right now because talking about poo does make most people feel a bit awkward because that's what we're talking about. Feces poo is a carrier for a lot of bacteria that comes out of your gut. And some rather innovative scientists have looked at that and asked the question, is transplanting someone's feces going to be able to transfer some of the good bacteria that the donor has? And Brennan, there's been some amazing studies that have really revolutionized the thinking around transplanting people's bacteria. There was a study that took the feces of a skinny mouse and inserted those feces, gross as that is, into a mouse that was fat, mouse that was obese. And what astonished the researchers was that act alone, over time, caused the fat mouse to lose weight and become skinny. And their minds were blown. They thought, let's try this in reverse. What if we took the feces, the poo from a fat mouse, insert that into a skinny mouse? What would happen? And sure enough, the skinny mouse grew obese. And that showed that the actual role of the gut bacteria was causative over whether someone became fat or maintained a skinny physique.
Interesting.
It's just phenomenal. And
so is there...
Oh,
go ahead.
No, please.
So, I mean, are they doing that in humans? Or how does that translate to now us, you and I?
Yeah, look, there's been, as I'm aware, 3 studies that have attempted to translate that into humans, but unsuccessfully, and I'll say yet. That shows that this ecosystem is quite complex. And so there's more work to be done to see if somebody's feces can help another person become healthy. And there's one area in particular that the science has actually proven to be quite effective. C. diff is an infection where harmful bacteria grows in the colon, and it leads to some really severe diarrhea. C. diff is the first affliction, shall we say, that has been really effectively treated by fecal transplants. And so we're at the early, rather exciting, somewhat scary phase of discovery here, because there's a lot of potential for how this can impact our health overall. What's important is that when you are taking bacteria from a healthy person, you may also be taking other issues that person has. And one of the studies that has been done was quite confronting, because the donor had a degree of depression. And when the recipient received that transplant, that recipient also became somewhat depressed.
Oh, interesting.
And so a lot of work has to be done to work out, let's be really careful what we're transplanting when we do that, when we get down this pathway, because there's good, but there can also be some damaging. So I think a lot more work has to be done before we're confident that there are solutions across the board. But the science is fascinating, and what's emerging.
So is that... I'm sort of jumping ahead almost, but is that to suggest that you could treat depression with a healthier gut?
Yeah, great question. There's been a number of studies that have shown the link between your gut bugs and your attitude, your psychology. And the vagus nerve that connects the two does transport information. And you can correlate certain gut profiles with certain psychological profiles. And the concept of mood foods, eat foods that make you feel good, is actually becoming a thing that science is validating and still discovering a lot more. And so correlations between what you eat, your gut profile, and the way you think. And therefore, as we contemplate the role PVO can play, we're starting to see the connection between someone's lifestyle, what they eat, who they interact with, their relationships, their stress, and their psychological health, their mental health. And so imagine there's a future where we can prescribe to you whole foods, plants, quality foods that impacts the way you think. I don't think that future's that far away. There's more work to be done to really understand that space, understand what's correlated versus what's causative. Yet, as that science emerges, we're going to be able to prescribe you a healthy lifestyle that also helps your mental health.
You mentioned something to me before we started talking about dirt. You said dirt and chronic disease. What were you talking about there?
Yeah. Professor Rob Knight, who I do quote a lot because he is a leading scientist in this space, he wrote book that essentially said dirt is good. And as a parent of 3 kids, I look at that and I say, well, I'm not sure my kids playing in dirt and then the resultant washing is actually really what I want to happen. But dirt, he's saying, allows the body to experience a variety of microbes that impact how the body builds resistance, builds strength, builds a robust ecosystem of bacteria that helps them actually fight off disease and remain healthy. And the studies have shown that exposure to dirt early on in life helps build that strength within to fight off disease, to fight off infection. And if we stop our kids playing in dirt, we're limiting the body's ability to build that strength, build that rigor, that robustness to fight off infection and disease. And ultimately, that can help or hinder somebody heading towards chronic disease. Because if the body has the ability to fight infection stronger than what others do, then that body is going to be able to ward off the chronic inflammation and the chronic diseases that result from chronic inflammation. And so what the hypothesis is that this exposure to dirt early on can help people become more resistant to allergies and resistant to autoimmune diseases. Because often we become so sanitized in our environment, we don't give our body the chance to build up the natural defenses that helps in those issues. So a degree of playing in dirt is actually a good thing. We should encourage our kids to get outside and actually allow their body to experience a variety of environments, because that can actually help build up the body's defenses.
So I know for me, even with like healthy eating or whether it be exercising, a lot of times the sort of the enemy of doing what you're talking about is just my lifestyle, bad habits. What would you suggest to sort of help turn that around?
Yeah, it's a great question, because we've all adopted both good and bad habits, right? And that's just happened over years of doing the same thing multiple times. And that could be just because we're busy, we've got demands, whether it's kids, whether it's parents, whether it's work. We've all faced and we're pressured by all these requirements we've got to do to live. And we often take shortcuts to make our lives easier, more comfortable. And sometimes these shortcuts are the ones that get in the way of us actually living well. So what we do in Pivio is we come back to the question of why. What is your why you want to live more well? And if you're clear on that why, then you're more likely to be willing to make choices rather than just do things out of habit. In our Pivio program, we recognize the importance of really addressing these core behaviors that become habits. And Professor Charles Abraham, who works alongside us, has clearly demonstrated through his many years of study and work that you need to address this core motivation that you have. Does that motivation change over time, or is it stable? And in our program, we demonstrate that if you have this stable motivation, your reason why that is enduring, that is clear, you're more likely to make good choices. Yet, we're all human, and there are times that we deviate from what is ideal. We accept that, because we want to ensure that everybody who wants to make this choice is encouraged to always feel they've got the choice and have that choice to choose better. And so throughout the program, we recognize that change is hard for a lot of people. And so we want to walk beside them, hold their hand through this change process. Because if you make the right choices more often, it's going to become easier for you. There was a program in UK the National Health Service, NHS, built called Couch to 5 kilometres. And that was a concept that encouraged those people who were very comfortable sitting on the couch to, across just 3 months, be able to run 5 kilometres. And the approach they took was these very small changes progressively. So day one could be, you know what, stand up 3 times a day when otherwise you would not. That's all. Anyone can do that. And when they did that the first day, the next day, okay, stand up 4 times a day. And these little micro changes over time, by end of week 1, you look back and you realize you're actually standing up a lot more than you did. And that builds that confidence that you can make some change. And then over the course of the subsequent weeks and months, okay, now let's walk to the letterbox. Now let's walk around the block. And these small micro changes over time enable people to change, and change in a way that endures, that lasts. And so we use principles like this in the PVO program to ensure that the changes that you adopt become lifelong habits, because that's when you do have the quality of life that endures over time. When more times than not, the behaviors we choose, the behaviors that actually lead to living well.
All right, so Daniel, thanks for your time today. Before we let you go, where can we find PVO at?
Sure. The PVO, we want to become available to anybody. So if any viewer or listener Googles pivio.tv, that's P-I-V-I-O, pivio.tv, you will find a number of programs that you can embrace. We're also on social media at PVO Health, be that Instagram or YouTube or Facebook.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, and we'll talk to you soon.
Good to see you, Brendan. Thank you.
Good to see you.